All right, things are going to be just a little bit different on the OHL podcast this week. Instead of a former player, manager, coach, official, you name it, we're going to talk to an author. And here's the thing about this particular author. When I was working with Don Cameron, he always talked about the calm and tranquil north and how much fun it was to go up there. And I'm going to be honest with you. You know that I'm not a fan of the colder weather, and the further north we go, the colder it gets. And I'm a little spoiled in the Midwest Division. 4 of the 5 arenas that we go to on a regular basis, pretty nice, pretty modern. And so going north where it's colder and working in an older arena can be a challenge for, grumpy old me. But I have really come to appreciate particularly the city of Sudbury. And that's why it's great to have author Scott Miller, who has written Leading the Pack, 50 years of Sudbury Wolves history. And Scott joins us on the OHL podcast this week. It's great to get you on the show. Thanks very much for making time and putting up with my long-winded introduction here.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. Great to be here and talk about the book and just OHL in general. Thank you.
I think the timing of the book, I mean, obviously it couldn't be much better, could it? The golden anniversary, 50 years of Sudbury Wolves hockey, but it's not like you just start a book when the season starts and all of a sudden we're approaching Christmas and the book is ready. So take me back to the genesis of all of this, Scott, and how it started for you.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, that it started because this 50th anniversary was approaching. It's the 50th anniversary of the Sudbury Wolves organization this year. So, it was initially going to be a group project with two friends and colleagues of mine, Mark Kohlberg, who's a professor at Laurentian here in Sudbury, and Mike Comito, who used to teach at Laurentian. He's elsewhere now, but people may recognize his name. He's pretty popular on Twitter. Hockey historian. He's written the Hockey 365 books. So we were going to do that as a group project about the history of the Sudbury Wolves. But before we really even got started, both Mark and Mike ended up indicating that they really couldn't commit to it. They had other projects and families, family commitments and professional commitments and so on. So I ventured on as a solo author. Mike Comito ended up writing the foreword for the book, and both him and Mark provided feedback on the draft. But what kind of started as a group project became this. And I mean, it's a subject I've always been interested in. In university, I wrote an essay about the Sudbury Wolves when they won the Memorial Cup in 1932, which, I'm sure you can do the math and figure out how did the Sudbury Wolves win the Memorial Cup in 1932, yet we're celebrating 50 years. So I cover all that history, the different teams in Sudbury that were called the Wolves dating back well over 50 years, basically 100 years, and all the way up until the end of last season. So that's kind of how it started. And that's, that was the beginning and how it came to be.
An essay while you're at Laurentian is one thing. A book the likes of this, and I know, Scott, how meticulously you've documented everything. This must have been a painstaking effort on your part. What was it like putting this, chronicle of 50 years, even almost 100 years of Sudbury Wolves hockey together? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of work. I mean, thankfully, when we initially came up with the idea for the book, it was 2019. So I mean, I knew I had a good amount of time to work on it. It's not like we came up with this in 2021. I mean, it was a lot of work and seemed quite daunting, but I just sort of chipped away at it as best I could, generally chronologically. I mean, I also benefited from being a Wolves fan my whole life. So basically everything that had gone on in my lifetime, not that I knew everything, but I could vaguely sort of remember the general sort of idea. And I had some background, like I said, having done that essay. I really just started at the beginning, really with when did people start playing hockey in Sudbury, the first sort of hockey clubs, how did the name Sudbury Wolves come to be? I spent a lot of time at the library here in Sudbury during COVID too, where I had restricted hours. So going through the books and the newspaper, microfilm, trying to piece that together. Like I said, there's a few local books that kind of generally talked about hockey, but there's no book to this extent that goes on about the Wolves specifically. And then just season by season. And a big thing too would be just the statistics. So once I sort of covered the pre-1972 period, which was probably the more challenging part because there's a team called the Sudbury Wolves that won the Memorial Cup in 1932. There was sort of different Wolves teams. There was a team in the late 50s, early 60s that was a professional team affiliated with the NHL and the Eastern Professional Hockey League. That Don Cherry played a season for them. So things like that. I mean, I knew this as a fan generally, but I never understood how it pieced together. So, but yeah, then once I got to the actual, the current era, the last 50 years, I would kind of start by looking at the stats. See, you can tell a lot by a team just by looking at its record, right? I mean, if they missed the playoffs, you probably have an idea that, not the strongest roster. Maybe there was some coaching changes, some trades. The fans probably weren't too happy. Or the other way around, you see a really good record and you can kind of get a general idea of how things went. And then I would go through the newspaper articles that I could find, interview people, who were maybe there at certain events, and then just kind of piece it together bit by bit. So yeah, it was a lot, but it all came together, and I'm happy with how it turned out. And so far, I've heard pretty good things from people who have managed to read it already.
I consider myself a pretty big fan of the Ontario Hockey League. Granted, there are 20 teams. I'm closest to Kitchener where I live and I work, but
Yeah.
I would not have known at all about the Don Cherry connection had it not been for your book to that professional NHL affiliated Sudbury Wolves team all those decades ago. But you mentioned just now, Scott, as a fan of the Wolves, you kind of knew about that in passing. So fan or super fan here? I mean, how would you really describe yourself?
Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan. Like, in Sudbury, it's a pretty popular thing to do. Even I feel like even people who aren't huge Wolves fans, like going to at least a game every year just to go to it. And the arena at least currently is downtown. But no, I'm a pretty big fan. I've never been a season ticket holder actually or anything like that. But I've always, probably since I was about 12 or 13, which is the year they went to the OHL finals and lost to Plymouth, is when I followed them pretty closely. And so no, I would say I'm a big fan. I knew about the Don Cherry thing because they did they did the CBC documentary, like the reenactment with what's his name, Jared Kiso from Shores. He played Don Cherry, and that was when I first heard about that because they briefly mentioned him in Sudbury. And I asked my dad, I said, Don Cherry played for the Wolves? And he said, well, it wasn't quite but even he didn't really fully know. He's like, yeah, it was like a Wolves team, but not the Wolves that we're talking about because he was like 28 at the time. So it wasn't a junior team. But yeah, so those are things I knew. Other players, just as a side note, other players who played for that Wolves team. Dave Keon played a few games for the Sudbury Wolves, the professional team. Gerry Cheevers, the goalie. It only lasted 4 years, that league, and then it folded. But yeah, and that's not mentioned a ton in the book. But there's actually a picture of Don Cherry in there in his Wolves jersey with his. He's got a crew cut, and it's pretty funny. But yeah, so I would consider myself a pretty big fan for sure. And just now that I've written this book, I feel like I learned a lot doing it, so that was great too.
Yeah, super fan status has been cemented now. There's no two ways about it, I don't think.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'll let people say that about me. I don't know if I'll say it about myself, but
Just because you mentioned it, I gotta ask, not to jump around the timeline so much, but Shoresy and Jared Kiso and Letterkenny, which was shot not at the Sudbury Arena, but the other arena, the other main arena up there in Sudbury. I mean, did it in any way put Sudbury hockey on the map? I know they just had the first sellout in years because it was Shoresy night at the Sudbury Arena.
yeah. Well, Shoresy night's coming up on Friday. Actually, we're on the December 9th, right? So, yeah, I guess he said this will be released a bit later, but anyways, but it's coming up on December 9th against Saginaw. So yeah, no, it's definitely I think a lot of people are sort of hearing about Sudbury. It's kind of funny being from here my whole life, and I've just heard people say like they have this idea of Sudbury now as the result of the show, and I think it's really cool. And then I watched, of course, and hearing them talk about sort of local bars and restaurants like the Colson and things like that, like places that I've actually been. And so no, it's pretty cool, and I think it's great for the community, and I'm glad that the Wolves are partnering with them to do some stuff like that. I think it's fun, and yeah, I really just hope it sort of continues to bring attention to Sudbury and hockey. And I mean, it's a great hockey town, so I think they made the right choice, sort of putting the story and making that the setting of the story. So no, it's pretty cool.
See, I'm just showing how far from the north I really am then down here in Southern Ontario. I thought the sellout a few weeks back was because it was Shoresy night.
No, that was I think what you're referring to. I think they were playing Barrie, and I think that was what was that? I was at that game and it was sold out. I'm not sure what the reason for that was, but yeah, I mean, I think people are just they had made a coaching change and they're playing generally better, and I think that was just people were just excited, and there might have been some other event, but no, the Shoresy night's coming up on the 9th, and I have tickets. I bought my tickets last week, and it didn't look just online like there was a ton left, so I'm sure that'll be a sellout too because a lot of people are Shoresy fans, and Saginaw's in town, so it's gonna be Michael Misa, so I'm excited to see him. So yeah, no, it should be a good game, and looking forward to sort of how they tie in the Shoresy aspect of it for sure.
I absolutely love it that the passion is there to sell out a game in Sudbury right now with the team the way that it is. And look, there's a lot to like about the current team, and we'll get into that. But I wonder about your earliest memories. My fondest memories now. I love going to Sudbury because the arena there has the same cornerstone as the arena here in Kitchener, the Memorial Auditorium. I love the Old Rock Coffee Shop across the street. And I've really come to like these older arenas that have some character. And the Sudbury Arena absolutely has that. You still got the portrait of the Queen. You've still got the wooden beams in the rafters. Like it's a hockey arena as opposed to more or less a multi-purpose facility. But what are your earliest memories of going to Wolves games as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot. My first memory, I think they were playing what were the Mississauga Ice Dogs at the time. And the reason I can remember is because a puck flew over the short end of the glass and hit a lady in the face. And I remember that's like my first hockey memory. And I remember thinking, like, this is great. Like, I was like 5, never seen anything like that again. Then probably a big one was, I was a bit older, grade 8, 12 or 13, was, like I mentioned earlier, 2007 when they made that run to the finals. I mean, that was really exciting. And I was at sort of that perfect age for, being sort of a junior fan. And Nick Foligno, Mark Stahl was the captain, Kimo Lou, Adam McQuaid, a number of guys who went on to the NHL. Unfortunately, they lost game 6 overtime to Plymouth. And I remember seeing that on TV. But that was really sort of the biggest, I think, memory of being a Wolves fan. And I do remember generally before that, in like the early 2000s, that, they were there. If you go to a Wolves game, there'd probably be a fight or something. They always had kind of tough teams and things like that. So no, a lot of great memories and a lot of good times there. And that definitely, I still like going to games to this day and have a great time. So, like you said, the Sudbury Arena. I mean, I think I took it for granted because it's always been there. But the more, there's been conversations in Sudbury about a new arena and things like that, and then just hearing people from outside of Sudbury be like, "Oh, that's that's an old arena," or things like that. I had never really thought of it that way until recently. So we'll see what happens with that. But for now, I think it's kind of cool to enjoy it while it lasts.
Besides that wood slat ceiling in there, two things that stand out feature wise. The climb up to the press box for those of us on the media side is terrifying. Those aren't steps. It's like climbing a ladder and you have your gear with you. I don't love it. And the stuffed wolf, of course, that comes out on the wire when the Wolves score a goal. Did you explore at all the origins of that mangy stuffed wolf in Leading the Pack?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, so you may have seen on there was a Sportsnet segment on this a while ago about the wolf with Mike Camito. So, but I do talk about it in the book. So, really, the first Wolves mascot was a live wolf in the early 1920s. That a farmer in Espanola, which is a little community 45 minutes outside of sort of New Sudbury, you might call it. We call it. A farmer in Espanola had accidentally caught this wolf in a bear trap, so he donated it to somebody who ended up deciding to make it the mascot of the Sudbury Wolves. It was still alive, and they would bring it to games and put a muzzle on it and have a chain on a chain and so on. I don't know what ever happened to that wolf, but for a while they had a live wolf. But then the stuffed wolf started in the early 1950s. The Sudbury Star, the local newspaper here, donated it to the team, which was like a senior team at the time, as like a token of appreciation. So initially it came out on a trap door, and then eventually it evolved into the pulley system that you mentioned, coming out of the rafters and facing the opposing team's bench. And from what I understand, there's been multiple, it's not like there's been one stuffed wolf for 50, 70 years. It's different ones. I mentioned in the book a story that, the one with the wolves, the stuffed wolf went missing. And then 10 years later, they found it in somebody's basement. Somehow someone found it in the basement of somebody's home, a former Laurentian student's basement. He lived in Toronto, and I guess he had stolen it. And they found it in their basement, and then they brought it back. But and then in that segment as well, and I do mention in the book, the other opposing teams over the years have apparently stolen it and taken it for a night and then brought it back. So I understand they have a latch now to sort of keep it to prevent theft. But so and that's another thing similar to the arena. That's something I always took for granted. I never really thought much of it. And then the more I speak with people from outside of Sudbury, or even people from Sudbury who maybe don't necessarily go to a ton of games, what they think about it. But to me, it's a great sort of sort of little distinct aspect of going to a Wolves game. And I do hope if we move to a new arena, they don't get rid of that, because I think it's a great tradition and something pretty unique.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And having spoken to former Wolves players on this podcast, I've come to learn that on occasion, the Wolf might find itself wearing a player's gear, usually a first-year player. They're coming in for practice and they see their gear up there on the Wolf. They better hurry up to make sure they can get that gear down and get themselves geared up before it's time for practice.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, see, that's what I mean. Like, there's all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, I wasn't able to include all of that in there, but yeah, those are the kind of stories that people share over the years with that Wolf. So yeah, I'm sure there's more to come to as if we keep it, which I hope we do.
Despite that championship back in 1932 that you mentioned for one of the former iterations of Sudbury Wolves hockey in the Nickel City, there hasn't been in the 50 years in Major Junior, that championship has remained elusive. How would you, or what would you describe as the best era of Sudbury Wolves hockey?
Wow. Yeah. No, that's a great question. I mean, I think pretty it's pretty obvious to say. I would say in the earliest years, honestly, specifically about the 1975, 1976, even the season before that. So 1975, the 1974-75 season, they made it to the semifinals and lost in overtime to Toronto. So they almost made it to the finals. The following year, 75-76, they won the Hamilton Spectator Trophy for best regular season. And then, they were the favorite to really win the championship. And then they played the Hamilton Finn Cups in the finals and lost in 5 games, unfortunately. But they had a really great team. And, of the Wolves numbers that are currently retired, there's 5 of them. 4 of those players were on that team: Mike Foligno, Ron Duguay, Rod Schutt, and Randy Carlisle. The other number that's retired is Hunter, who his brother played for Kitchener, or did he play for Kitchener? I always get them mixed up, Dale and Dave.
Dale did. Yep, it was Dale.
There we go. So there we go. There, I always even during the book, I always have to double check because they have similar first names too. But anyways, yeah. So I would say those were the sort of the best teams they had in the mid 1970s, and even into the later part of the 70s. Mike Foligno, led the OHL in points one year up until Quinton Byfield. He was the highest drafted Wolves player. He went to Detroit, 3rd overall. And then the 80s, I mean, shifting a bit, kind of the opposite of your questions. And the 80s were brutal. They were the worst team in the CHL throughout the 80s. They made the playoffs only once and got swept. So they didn't win a playoff game all throughout the 1980s. And then they finally won a series in the early 1990s. They were good in the early 1990s as well. They made it to Game 7 of the conference finals and lost to Detroit. And then, they even had some good teams in the early 2000s with their current head coach, Derek McKenzie, when he was a player. But like you said, really overall, they made it to the conference. They made it to the OHL finals twice in 50 years and the conference finals only 3 times. So, I'm a bit jealous of Kitchener's resume, but, there's, we'll see. I mean, yeah, I'm getting off track now. Now I'm just starting. Now it's really setting in the the lack of. You're making me reflect. Yeah, I know they haven't won anything, but yeah, to answer your question, the 70s were probably the best, but they've had some good teams despite what it's their record might say. But we'll see. Always a chance to change that. So hopefully they do soon.
Was there ever any danger, Scott, over the 50 years that the team has been in the OHL, OHA, of it leaving Sudbury through various owner turmoil?
Certainly, yeah, and I mean, specifically, probably the most serious time was the 1980s because they were, like I mentioned, they weren't performing well on the ice, but at the same time, Sudbury, and many of your listeners may already know this, is a mining town, Nickel City, obviously. So in the 1980s, still very much more so dependent on it than we are now. It was not quite a one resource town, but pretty close, right? So then the world nickel market wasn't great in the early 1980s, and there were strikes, and anyway, so the local economy wasn't doing great. So not only do you have a team that's struggling, where even in good times people might not be wanting to go see them, but the team's struggling, and the community is struggling economically. So the team was losing a lot of money because not a lot of people were going to games. And there were serious talks of is this team going to have to fold or relocate? It seemed at various times like it was looking like that. But of course, here we are celebrating those 50 years, and in 1986, the ownership group that was really kind of struggling the most, they sold it to Ken Burgess, who passed away in the late 1990s, but he really turned the franchise around and, in a sense, kind of saved them because he took over and things really changed almost right away. So, yeah, and I mean, throughout the history, there's been mentions of relocation, but I would say the only time that it was really serious was the 1980s, but thankfully, it didn't come to that.
Heard lots of great things about the Burgess family as owners in this league and what they meant to not just the league, but keeping that team in Sudbury and keeping some stability there as well. And I'm thinking too, Scott, on you at the age you were when that run came along in '07 with Mike Foligno behind the bench. And I think one of the things that makes it so exciting is that it was so unexpected, right? So you would have been at the perfect time as a fan and perfect age to really get excited by all of this. And then it also is like lightning in a bottle, because if I remember that team correctly, you're roughly 500, you're not having a, you're not running away with the league by any stretch. And then you come in, you catch fire in the playoffs. Next thing you know, you're in the OHL final against Plymouth.
No, it was a huge surprise. Yeah, that they finished below 500. They was the seventh seed. I think they're right. There was, they were below 500, and but Mike Foligno made some really good trades at the deadline. They got Sebastian Dom, who is a goalie from Denmark. They got picked up Justin Donati, who was a really great forward, and his twin brother Tyler Donati played for Belleville, and they actually faced each other in the conference finals. So that was kind of a cool storyline, two twin brothers going at it. But I mean, they had the pieces there to begin with. I mean, they had Mark Stahl, who won OHL Defenseman of the Year that year, and even though the Wolves lost, he won playoff MVP, which is pretty incredible. And they had Nick Foligno. So I think they always had the pieces there. It just kind of came together at the right time, and they beat Mississauga, if I'm remembering correctly, in the first round, and then they swept Barrie, and then all of a sudden they were, going to the conference finals, and the momentum was on their side. And then, the cover book, the picture on the cover of the book, pardon me, is Matt Diaz scoring in triple overtime of Game 6 of the conference finals to send Sudbury back to the OHL finals for the first time in 35 years. So no, it was really exciting and very unexpected. I do remember, and it was nice to find out that my memory is correct. I was able to confirm, because I remember going to the home opener of that season, and they lost. Who was it? I think Niagara or something. Anyways, they lost like 10-4, and I was there with my friend. I remember thinking, "Holy geez, this is how we're starting the season." And you never would have thought that home opener, season opener, that they lose 10-4. That 8 months later they'd be in the OHL final, one goal away from Game 7. So very exciting. But I think even for that reason, even though they did come up short, people still remember it pretty fondly, because one, it was the first time they had been there in such a long time, and two, it was so unexpected. Everyone was just kind of excited to have seen that. So, hoping they can do it again. And I mean, the team, not that I'm saying the team they have now could do that, but they can score goals and they have the skill. So if they could clean it up, that goes to show for any team. Once you make the playoffs, anything can happen. You get a hot goalie and just start clicking, and you never know. So.
Casual fans may not realize the evolution of the Wolves, not just the logo, but even the uniform colors. They'd look at the Wolves now. We've known them for quite some time, a couple of decades, I guess, as blue largely with some gray in there. But one of the other things I love about the arena is when you come in those main doors, it's green basically everywhere, because those used to be the colors of the Sudbury Wolves. And you look up at those names in the rafters too, and those banners have the green coloring on them. So what was the evolution of the Wolves uniform over the decades?
Right, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, the green and gold was sort of the traditional colors, even going back before 1972. The story goes that I guess these very early teams that were called kind of informally the Sudbury Wolves, they started wearing green jerseys because a lot of the players on that team, on the Wolves team, had played on another team in like a local league, and they happened to wear green jerseys. So they all just started wearing green jerseys, just because, they happened to own them, I guess. And it sort of started a tradition. And by the 1930s, they were called the green shirts, sort of casually, as like as a name in the press. So by the time the team came in 1972, it was just sort of a natural choice, I think, to do the green and the gold trim. And then in the late 1980s, when Ken Burgess took over, not right away, but a couple years in, he decided to change the color scheme. And his sort of famous line was, "Whoever heard of a green wolf?" He said, "There's no such thing as a green wolf. We'll have a gray wolf." And they changed the colors to blue and gray and white. which apparently were the corporate colors of his company. Where he had sort of made his money before he bought the OHL team. His corporate colors were that, but no, I think it goes well, and so that's sort of how the green wolf became the gray and the blue wolf, a change in about halfway through the franchise's history. But the logo, that one's a little less clear. I mean, the logo is pretty iconic now, but exactly who designed it or anything like that, I didn't really get into because I couldn't find anything firm. You can kind of see in pictures that it evolves over time, but sort of the current iteration of it, there's a theory that if you look at the picture of the big bad wolf from the Disney Three Little Pigs cartoon from like the 1930s, if you look at that big bad wolf, it kind of looks like the wolf that we know today. So there's a theory, a very unofficial theory that I don't even include in the book, from somebody I know who I believe is a graphic designer. His theory is that's where it comes from, but again, that could be complete hearsay, so I didn't include that. And I also heard from somebody that they said someone's daughter drew it, but again, I wasn't able to confirm that. So who exactly designed it, I don't know. But you can see the evolution just through pictures, and now we have that logo, and it's pretty iconic, recognizable logo now, which I hope they never change.
I can tell you that here in Kitchener, we try to forget the 1990s when the cartoon cowboy was a part of the uniform. It's forever. It's basically been just a classic Rangers, right, with the font. Right. Do you have a preference as to more of the classic Wolves jersey / colors to today?
It's funny. I've really warmed up to the idea of the green and gold throwbacks. I love the logo. I don't think they should change the logo. Like at least the basic design of it. It's one thing to change the gray wolf to a green wolf, but I just think the general outline should be the same. But I would have liked them to see even this year to have done like a green and gold throwback. Especially in the NHL, you see those reverse retros. I think it's the Minnesota Wild have those really nice gold and green throwbacks, and it got me thinking the Wolves should do something like that. So, I mean, I like them. I think they're both nice in their own way. For the longest time, I would have said blue and white for sure, but I don't know. I've kind of warmed up to the green and gold, so I wouldn't mind seeing them maybe trying that out for a little bit, or at least throwing it in there as an alternative once in a while. So, but overall, I mean, I think when you have that logo, that's the most important, and the color scheme is just kind of something fun you can play around with.
Some time ago on this podcast, I had the chance to talk to Bob McKenzie, who everybody knows, I think, as the insider in the National Hockey League, and has carved out a heck of a career as one of the most influential people in the entire game. And he, of course, got his start with the Sault Star, covering the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. As a guy that does what I do, and that's broadcasts hockey, I can't help but ask about Joe Bowen, who many might not know got his start calling Wolves games up there in Sudbury.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, he's from Sudbury, and a lot of people don't know that. And I got a chance to interview him for the book, which is great. And I'm also a Leafs fan, so that was cool just as a Leafs fan to just talk to him over the phone. And it's sort of weird hearing, that's his actual voice, right? The guy that hearing that over the phone, it's like, I've heard you on my TV for years, and now we're talking. But I know it was great to interview him, and he was very, very friendly and had some good stories. But so he. After he graduated university, he started working at a radio station here in town. And the way he tells it, he was working there for about a year in some department, not broadcasting, and then an opening came up, and he applied for it, and he was given the job, and so he started covering the Wolves on radio. He was there for those really good teams in the mid 1970s, and he had some shared some memories about that, and then I believe he got an opportunity in the AHL, and then made his way up to the NHL with the Leafs as we know him today. So no, that's pretty cool. And then he was at they had the 50th anniversary night a month or so ago, and he was there, which was cool. And his son is a goaltender who he's sort of ventured into broadcasting now as well. And he was drafted by the Wolves. He's a goalie, and he actually played a few games for the Wolves. So the Bowens have a lot of connection to Sudbury and the Wolves specifically. So it's something pretty cool that a lot of people don't know. But one of the more sort of notable probably commentators in hockey in the last number of years started with the Wolves. So
I can't help but think, you mentioned that you're a Leafs fan as well. So I'm going to say you're lucky because you're such a young man. I'm born 1971, so that's 4 years after the Leafs won their last Stanley Cup, and I'm a Leafs fan. You're talking about 50 years of Sudbury Wolves hockey, no championships. It's been 50 plus for the Leafs, although you haven't had to live through all of them like I have. But Let me ask you this, Scott. If it's a Leafs final or a Wolves final, which is the more desirable to you as a hockey fan?
Oh God. I mean, I know I'm the guy writing the Wolves book, and I do love the Wolves, but I mean, the Leafs, like a cup is a cup, you know. And as much as I'd love to see them both win, I feel like I can't deny the Leafs a chance for a cup. So I'd probably have to say that. You know, it's not an easy choice, but you know, I'd like to see them with the Leafs win a Stanley Cup. But I mean, to see the Wolves win an OHL championship, let alone a Memorial Cup, would be amazing as well. But you know, if I'm forced to pick, you know, the Stanley Cup is the ultimate prize in hockey. So I think even guys who have, you know, the handful of people who've won a Memorial Cup and a Stanley Cup will probably tell you that. So that I'll defer to the Stanley Cup. Nothing against the Wolves.
You mentioned talking to Joe Bowen for your research in this book, and I think you talked to Randy Carlyle as well, didn't you?
I did, yes.
What was he like?
Awesome. He was nice to talk to, and I spoke with him over the phone. And we had a book launch here in Sudbury at the Beef and Bird, which is a local bar that was founded by Gerry, who played in the NHL, but also coached the Wolves in the '70s and won OHL Coach of the Year. But anyways, Randy Carlyle happened to be in Sudbury at the time, and he showed up to the launch, which was awesome. So I got to meet him, and no, he was great. He was great to interview, and had a lot of great insight and speaking with him, and sort of. He was part of those really good Wolves teams. And his number was second player to ever have his number retired after Mike Foligno. So no, it was really cool to speak with him. And again, as a Leafs fan, I mean, I remember when he was coaching the Leafs. So again, it was sort of cool to speak to him, and almost surreal in a way. But no, he was very friendly, and glad I got to speak with him, and then get to meet him and give him a copy of the book personally as a thank you. So really glad I got to speak with him as well.
I'm trying to think of the others that are up there in the rafters. Carlisle is there. Obviously, Hunter is there. You mentioned him before. Foligno. Isn't Duguay up there too?
Ron Duguay, and then the other is Rod Shutt.
Right.
Rod Shutt, who has the franchise record. He scored 72 goals in 75-76. So that probably will never be broken. But yeah, Rod Shutt. And like I said, 4 of those 5, the only one being Hunter, were on that one Wolves team that almost won the OHL championship. So they were pretty good, and you know, all of them went on to the NHL, obviously. So yeah, and we have a jersey retirement here in Sudbury. Fortunately, I won't be able to make it to that game, but on February 3rd. So I don't know who they're going to retire. There's some speculation. I'm thinking it's either going to be Mike Fisher maybe, or Pat Verbeek. After that, I don't know. It's kind of hard. I mean, it could be anybody, obviously, but there's Pat Verbeek, who's, you know, he had a good career with Sudbury and NHL career. Mike Fisher, who was their captain and obviously had a good NHL career too. Those are my 2 guesses, but maybe Mike Smith, the goalie, as a dark horse. I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch, but we'll see who it is. They haven't announced it, so I'm curious to see. They're going to be adding another number to the rafters this year as part of the celebration. So,
but you know what that gets me thinking, Scott, is championships be damned. There's a pretty impressive list of players that came through Sudbury and competed for their Wolves on their way to something else in hockey.
For sure. And I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, you'd think that, you know, the 50 years, you know, they must have, you know, had some bad teams, which I guess they did for essentially a decade in the 80s. But no, there's been a lot of great players. And there was an article published in, you know, 2015. So I don't know if it's still accurate, but at that time it was by the Hockey News. And they reviewed, and they had certain criteria I mentioned in the book. But basically, they determined that during a certain period, within certain criteria for games played, the Sudbury Wolves had produced the most NHL players of any CHL or like junior or NCAA team. I think the criteria was like 200 games played between these years. So I know you could play with those numbers and stuff, but still something I don't think I would have thought of. But no, there's been a ton of names that, you know, sometimes even I really didn't even know going through it from earlier eras. But yeah, like, you know, some we've already mentioned. And then I mean, you have like Zach Sfortini, Rory Fitzpatrick, Sean O'Donnell. I mean, this is an older era. Andrew Raycroft, Mike Smith, young guys right now, Quinton Byfield, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in Buffalo. He's been getting some starts, I saw. You know, so, and they have more on the way. David Goyette just got drafted. Quinton Musty's coming up this year. But no, there's been a ton of NHL players have played for Sudbury at one point or another, whether for part of their career or all their career. So, and yeah, I mean, fans are, you know, that's the thing. You know, you mentioned the sellout the other night, and I mean, despite these 50 years, people love the Wolves. You know, people are still huge fans, and they draw pretty good crowds still, regardless. So I think as soon as they get the playoffs, if really, I think as soon as they make it the first round, people are there, and I think as soon as they make it to the second round, let alone the third, that building's gonna be packed every night. So when they do eventually win that championship, whenever that will be, it's going to be crazy, and I look forward to being a part of that. Hopefully.
You just mentioned his name again, and it came up earlier too when he established a new Wolves record. But I wonder if you don't feel as though you got kind of stiffed in Sudbury with the lost time to COVID because you didn't get full use out of Quinton Byfield.
Yeah. I mean, that was sort of because of COVID. That season got cut, and they won a division. They won a division championship by default because they were in first in the division when the season got canceled in 2020 because of COVID. But yeah, no, I mean, it would have been nice to have him there, and who knows what they could have done in the playoffs. Because they had a good team overall: Jack Thompson, Isaac Phillips, others. So yeah, it was unfortunate, but it was nice that we got to have a player like that, and he became the highest drafted Wolves player in franchise history when he went to LA, second overall, and good to see him playing in the NHL now, and I'm glad I got to see him as well. So would have been nice to get him longer, but that was one of the many sort of difficulties, I guess, in the scheme of things, pretty small, but caused by COVID, complications caused by COVID. So it's too bad it got cut short, but at least we got to experience some of it. So.
Could you put into perspective what the Wolves mean to the city of Sudbury?
For sure, yeah. And I mean, this is a question I did sort of wondered as I was writing the book. And, I think Zach Stortini, who I interviewed, he was the assistant coach at the time. He's since moved on to the AHL for a coaching job. But I interviewed him, as well as his dad, who played for the team in the early 70s, Tim Stortini. But anyways, I thought he said it quite well. He said, the Sudbury Wolves are more than a hockey team. And then he elaborated, and I include sort of more what he said there. But, and I know it can be maybe cliche when we talk about hockey sometimes, but I do think he had a good point that the Sudbury Wolves are really a part of the community, and I know they are the case in a lot of other junior cities, but I think Sudbury is one of those cities where it's especially important because if you go to the beginning of Sudbury, really hockey and mining have been the two things that have always pretty much been consistent. Sudbury's changed a lot in the last 100+ years. And the Wolves have been there for really over 100 years. So I think they mean a lot to Sudbury just because they've been a part of the community for so long, and something that people identify with, both who live in Sudbury and outside of Sudbury, sort of the Sudbury and the Wolves. So I think they're an important part of the community, and despite that lack of championship banners, people still really love the team and going to the games and remaining hopeful. And like I said, when the day comes that they do eventually win a championship, because I do believe they will. That's going to really show in a way that maybe people from outside of Sudbury aren't aware of, but sort of everyone who's lived here and followed the team throughout those years will sort of we all kind of know it's the case. It's just a matter of getting the opportunity to really celebrate it as with a championship. So
you alluded to it earlier when we were talking about the arena, and you said it's still downtown for now. 5 years ago, maybe more, 10 years ago, I would have been like, sooner the better. Let's get a nice new arena up in Sudbury, blah, blah, the fancier the better. But I've really come to appreciate the character. I mentioned this already earlier, but what do you think is going to happen? Is there going to be a new facility built? Is there any chance that something new stays downtown? Should we just keep the character that is the Sudbury Arena right now?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it's been such a long, drawn out process and lots of changes and things like that. I mean, for now, like I said, I mean, the arena's downtown, and I have a lot of good memories there. So just enjoying that for now. I think logically, eventually we will get a new arena because I mean, a building can't last forever. But where it is and when that's going to happen, I have no idea. So I mean, for the time being, like I said, just going to enjoy it, and as long as the Wolves stay in town, I mean, that's I think what's most important. And I mean, it would be kind of cool if they do get lucky and win an OHL championship in the next few years to do it in that arena, and then maybe then we have a sort of a nostalgic attachment to it all of a sudden that they win something, or they decide that's kind of the last hurrah and we'll sort of get a new arena anyways. But your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. So for now, just sticking with the old Sudbury Arena and enjoying the games there.
I've been known in the past, Scott, to kind of float the idea that what the Ontario Hockey League really needs is a Northern division. And ever since North Bay came back into the league, I'm even more interested in the possibility. I tend to get pushback, particularly from folks in Barrie, because I put Barrie into that Northern division with North Bay, Sudbury, the Sioux, and Saginaw. But from a Northerner's perspective, would you support my ideas for realignment and getting some kind of North division going here?
I think that's a great idea. I've never thought about that. And immediately when you said that, I mean, of course, I thought of North Bay, the Sioux, Sudbury, and then I thought who else? And then it's Barrie. And I know people from Barrie don't consider themselves part of Northern Ontario, and they really aren't. But logically, I mean, they're closer than they maybe want to admit. The distance from Sudbury to Barrie is probably closer than us to the Sioux. The Sioux's at least the same distance. I've driven to the Sioux and I've driven to Barrie, and Barrie seems closer in my mind. I don't know. Maybe it's the bigger highway, but no, I think that's a cool idea. And I mean, unfortunately, because the Sioux's in the west, so we don't actually play the Sioux. Sudbury doesn't play the Sioux all that much, relatively speaking. And when we do play North Bay or the Sioux, it always seems to be on like a Wednesday night or a Sunday, I guess, for scheduling. That's convenient. But my friends and I, a few times when they've had games in North Bay. The Wolves are playing in North Bay on a Friday, and we've gone there and stayed in North Bay just to watch the game. And I've often said I feel like they should really take advantage of that more, and maybe get each team should be sending buses of fans to the games and sort of fostering that rivalry. I mean, with the Sioux, Sudbury and the Sioux Greyhounds have a rivalry going back like over 100 years. No, I think that's a great idea. And then throw Saginaw in there. I guess is the fifth team. So probably some pushback, I would imagine, and who knows if that'll ever happen. But that would be really cool, and I think sort of really amp up those northern rivalries. Sounds like a good idea to me. At least try it out. Why not? They've mixed up the divisions all various times throughout the league's history. So even just as an experiment, see what happens.
All right, I'm going to make sure I send you my petition when I start it. You'll get your signature on there as well. We're all set.
Sure, sounds good.
Derek McKenzie, you mentioned him before, obviously as a player, now back as the new head coach, following in the footsteps of another former Wolf, Craig Duncanson, who was let go earlier this season. But this is a team, honestly, Scott, when I look at it, that I think I had them pegged top 4 to start the season. I know they're not there right now, but there's lots of pieces on it that I like. I loved the acquisition of Joe Ranger, Goyette, Musty. They kind of go without saying, I think, in terms of the ability that's there. But what do you think the prospects are of this Wolves team this year? We're a third of the way into the season, and I still can't figure out everything in this OHL the way it's going.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I expected them to start much better than they did, and their initial start wasn't terrible, and then they really went off the rails. But I mean, I think you saw even then, and even now, they just beat Niagara the other day or yesterday, I guess, 13-2. So I mean, they can score goals for sure. They have the skill, and there's no shortage of skill. So I think it's just a matter of maybe tightening things up and things like that. I mean, I think they're a playoff team. I'd be shocked if they miss the playoffs. I mean, they're hanging on right now, but I think the coaching changes generally. I think they're playing better and winning some games, and so no, I think they should secure a playoff spot. And then, like we said, with 2007, once you're in there, anything can happen. And they have the talent, and they have the experience, sort of veteran players, like you mentioned, Joe Ranger. Defense, they have Holmes, and they have Collins on D, and forwards, like you said, Musty, Goyette, but then other guys like Alex Ferrand, who's from Sudbury, DeGrazias seems to be scoring a lot, and so no, they have. I think they've underperformed, but the potential's there. So lots of season left, and I think we'll be seeing a return to the playoffs in April, and really looking forward to that and seeing what they can do once they get there.
Obviously, as a guy that works in the Western Conference, we get there just that one time every year, and over the years, there have been some stinkers on the part of the Kitchener Rangers up there in Sudbury, including earlier this year when Kitchener got trounced 6-1. And I can tell you that the big train horn that sounds when the Wolves score can get on your nerves a little bit if you're hearing it too often against the team that you're cheering for in the building, the visitor. But you talk about playoffs and your opportunities in the past to be there for big playoff games. That's going to be one of my great regrets. Unless it gets to an OHL final, we won't see Kitchener and Sudbury together. I would love to be there at the Sudbury Arena for a playoff game sometime. What's the atmosphere like?
Oh yeah, no, that would be amazing. And I mean, really, Kitchener and Sudbury have only played each other twice in the playoffs in the last 50 years. So yeah, no, not something you get to see a lot, but that would be great. But no, I mean, it's pretty exciting. I mean, they haven't gone especially deep in recent years, but I remember being there. I believe it was in the second round against Barrie, and then that 2007 run. And I mean, it was everyone's pretty fired up, and every sort of shot or scoring chance you might say or big save, and the whole arena is going crazy. And by the later stages of that playoff run, I mean, you couldn't really get a ticket. I remember, and we'd just have to watch it on TV and stuff. But no, it's an exciting atmosphere, and I mean. I mentioned in the book there was an article when Adam McQuaid, who won a cup with Boston in 2011, he was part of that Wolves run, and he said that was one of the best or craziest atmospheres he had ever been a part of, and that's somebody who went on to win a Stanley Cup, and he was saying that after he had won a Stanley Cup in Boston. So I mean, for an experienced NHL guy who's won a cup to still think of the Sudbury Arena during the playoffs as a crazy atmosphere, I think kind of speaks for itself. But yeah, I mean, it's energizing. I was at that game actually where they beat Kitchener. I've been to a few games this year, and they always seem to lose. They've lost every time except that one. So I don't feel too bad for you because I needed that win. But Kitchener beat Sudbury pretty bad earlier in the year, so I guess we're even. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it would be pretty exciting. I think especially too, they missed the playoffs last year, and then a couple of years of COVID, no playoff hockey really at all, regardless. So, I think this year, first round, whatever, as long as they make it, I think it's going to be a pretty packed house. And then the further they go, the more exciting and more difficult to get in it'll be. But the whole city will be behind them. So, really hoping they can make something happen.
As I reflect on your book, Leading the Pack, 50 Years of Sudbury Wolves History, celebrating this 50th anniversary of Wolves hockey in Sudbury, it sounds like it's been about a 3-year project for you. You're a young guy. You've got a book now under your belt. Are you going to be writing more? Do you have another book in you?
I mean, maybe for the right subject, maybe, yeah. Like, because I mean, like, this book was a lot of work, like we talked about, or like you had asked. But I mean, yeah, I know it was a lot of work in terms of time spent and stuff. But I genuinely really enjoyed doing it because it's a subject I enjoy and something I was interested in as a fan. So I think, yeah, I'm certainly open to doing something else if the right subject comes along, and it's something again I enjoy doing. And I think something people will enjoy reading because ultimately you put in all this work, you want people to be interested and enjoy it. So nothing imminent right now. I mean, I'm just sort of promoting this one and enjoying sort of seeing it out there finally. And but yeah, I mean, I'm definitely open to the possibility of new projects, and whether it be about hockey or I don't know anything else. But I think hockey's sort of the funnest to write about. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see, and if so, yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine what it'd be about, but open to anything.
What's it been like doing the sort of promotional tour for the book? You mentioned the chance to, at the launch to meet Randy Carlyle, thank him in person, hand him a signed copy of the book. What's it like out there promoting the book?
It's been pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels weird at first because then like I've been at a few of the Wolves games, and the Wolves have been nice enough to let my publisher set up a little booth. If people want to buy the book, and I mean it's available at the Wolves gift shop too. But and then having people come up to me and be like, "Oh, I saw that article in the newspaper. Oh, I saw you on the news." And it's kind of like a weird feeling. I'm sure you know that better than me, but just like it's weird, sort of people recognizing you, even on a small scale. It's not like I'm walking around town and people are pointing me out, but even just complete strangers recognizing me, I think has been kind of neat. But no, it's been fun, and it's great hearing from people and hearing their stories about Wolves games, or a few people who have gotten it and read it pretty quickly, telling me that they enjoyed it, or what they, memories that, they remembered from the book, which was nice to hear because I'm glad I included things, people remember, games they remember being at. I mean, I couldn't possibly include everything, so I tried to choose the most memorable stuff when I could. So no, it's been really exciting, and there's more to come. You know, different stuff, sort of little podcasts like yours and things like that. So no, it's been a lot of fun, and I've been enjoying that. So just gonna keep on rolling and getting it out there, and then hopefully generating some interest for those who are Wolves fans or just hockey or OHL fans in general.
Yeah, see, that's the thing for me. I'm glad it's available in the Wolves merch shop, because it should be. I've always thought, Scott, that this league needs kind of an OHL wide book that's in every one of the league's cities, like every team's merch shop, just because I think the fans of this game, I think, as you would know, are quite passionate. So even though we don't have one about the entire league, this is one that I think is just terrific for all the reasons I've already talked about. Please let us know where we can get our hands on Leading the Pack.
For sure, yeah. Well, I mean, just before that, I agree with your point there, and I think that would generate a lot of interest because I mean, the OHL has been, the greatest producer of NHL players of the last however many years. So no, I think that would be interesting for sure. But yeah, I mean, so for people who are in Sudbury, I know a lot of your listeners are all over the place, but if you happen to be in Sudbury, you can get it in store at the chapters here in town, at the new Sudbury Mall, at Greater Sports, which is the merch store owned by the Wolves, or at the Wolves gift shop at the arena. For those of you who aren't physically in Sudbury, you can order it online through Indigo Chapters, Amazon, my publisher's website, which is Latitude 46 Publishing, or really anywhere you get your books, you can order it online. For the Christmas season, if you think it'd be a gift for somebody, you got to buy for or yourself, that's where you can get it. So, yeah, if people do end up buying one, thank you. Thanks for your interest, and I hope you enjoy it.
I'm here to tell you right now, and I do have, maybe it's a little bit biased, I've shared my fondness for Sudbury. I'm not making it up just because I'm talking to you. I said it while I was up there just about a month or so ago, but this would be great. If you're an OHL fan or there's an OHL fan in your life, I can't think of a better little stocking stuffer than Leading the Pack, written by our guest here today. So Scott, thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for the work that you put into this, because I can tell this was a bit of a passion project, wasn't it?
For sure, yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I hope that shows, and people enjoy it, and I learned a lot doing it, so I hope people learn some stuff as well, and yeah, thanks a lot for having me and giving me the chance to talk about the book, and hopefully reach a new audience. So thank you.
Scott Miller, author. How does that sound?
Sounds good. I like it. Thank you. Yeah.
Really appreciate you joining the show.
Yes. No. Thanks again.